All right, good morning, everyone. Hope you're having a good morning so far. We're going to dive into your weekly weather outlook. We're going to talk about the weekend. We're going to give an update on the tropics, all that good stuff. But I just want to make sure that we get a couple more people on here first. Okay. If you are watching, feel free to comment where you're watching from. Say hello. And it looks like we have a few people on, so I'm just gonna dive right in. All right, so it has been dry, dry, and dry. Those are the words for this past week. We got a new drought monitor yesterday. We get these updated every Thursday, and we do anticipate that drought spreading across the Sunshine State, and that's exactly what happened. So, nearly all of our coastal spots, with the exception of Pensacola area, are now moderately dry, and even in the Pensacola area, they're not just moderately dry, they are severely dry. And even our inland areas, we're doing actually all right. We were seeing a lot of much needed rainfall targeting those inland spots the past few weeks, and now even those areas are abnormally dry. So I want to touch base on when we're going to see rain again, and why it's not going to be a lot, and why we've been so dry. And we talk about ridging, we've talked about that in the past, but basically when you have southeast ridge set up and it doesn't budge, it's not allowing for what are called troughs to dig in. So we're going to continue to stay very dry. And another thing we're watching that wouldn't necessarily help us out, see some people, Mike from PCB, hello from Tennessee, Pam, Torreya State Park area, Anne, hello. All right, good to see some of you guys this morning. All right, another thing we're watching is what is called a cut-off low. So when you have a low pressure system, the classic extratropical system, it moves typically west to east, as most of our weather does, and you see a cold front, warm front. It's the classic setup associated with that. Sometimes you can just have a cutoff low, and this is very difficult to be able to predict rain chances and other sorts of ingredients when we don't know exactly where this is going to go, because you don't really have that fluid direction. And so what we're watching is where this low is going to go, and honestly, it doesn't even know where it wants to go yet. So as we get closer and closer, we'll know whether we're going to welcome back north winds, whether we're going to be able to kick our ridging out of here. But the big picture through the weekend, the best we can do is just going to be an isolated shower or storm. That's just going to be with our sea breeze, mesoscale sea breeze. So that's that land heating faster than the Gulf of Mexico. And so when we get into the afternoons, and this is our summertime setup, so we're slowly getting into that summertime pattern. You probably already know what I'm talking about if you've lived here the past couple of summers, or if you've lived here your whole life. Clearly, along the coastline, Gulf of Mexico is a huge body of water, so it takes way longer to heat up. And so during the afternoon every day in Florida, we know how hot and humid it gets in summer. Basically, the land starts to heat up faster than the Gulf, and so you have less dense air. It rises with daytime heating and instability, and then that relatively cooler, denser air over the Gulf has those pockets to sweep inland. And so this tends to happen on repeat during the afternoons when you have humidity there, you have instability there, and then wherever those pockets sweep inland, wherever they pop up based on wind direction and speed, that's where you get isolated showers, and with enough instability, isolated thunderstorms heading into the afternoon. That's it. That's all we're going to be able to do this afternoon. Might be able to squeeze out a shower into Saturday, Sunday, isolated shower, isolated storm. That is it. Now you have South Florida dealing with flash flood warnings in areas like Miami, because they're dealing with all those thunderstorms that are turning, as we could potentially see evolve into our first subtropical or tropical storm of the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season. This is our next significant rainfall event, aside from just your sea breeze afternoon storms. just checking on comments occasionally as well. Aside from your classic setup here, because obviously if one community sees a pop-up shower, the rest of the area could stay completely dry, and so that means nothing to the rest of us. So the more widespread rainfall shot is going to be Monday into Tuesday. Still some variation on the models here, and this will also have to come into play with that cutoff low we were talking about earlier. Where that goes could actually cause us to be very, very dry after this front comes through as well. So this, we'll take what we can get. Granted, we're exceptionally dry, so we will take it, but fair warning, this is looking like more of a 1/10 to 1/4 of an inch rain event, potentially isolated spots up to 1/2 of an inch of rain, and we're still likely to see, with that next drought monitor update on next Thursday, conditions worsening as well. All right, I do want to dive into the tropics this morning. First things first, the Panhandle will see no impacts, direct nor indirect, from what could be that first tropical or subtropical system of the 2020 season for the Atlantic. Let's start with the National Hurricane Center updates. 80% chance of development for both the next 48 hours and into the 5 days. So as we embark into the weekend, we are expecting either subtropical or tropical storm Arthur to form. Arthur's the first name on the list. The next would be Bertha. We have not seen any names so far this season, and the technical start is, of course, as always, June 1st, but we've been able to do this the past 5 hurricane seasons where we've seen something form before that technical start. That's why National Hurricane Preparedness Week is that first week of May, because you just never know what can turn in. Obviously, most projections at this point are pointing to an active 2020 hurricane season. That's due to above normal sea surface temperatures, which is one of the key ingredients you need for tropical development. So when we talk about extratropical, tropical, subtropical, in terms of just getting the name, it doesn't really matter if it's subtropical or tropical. If we can get either one of those, we get Arthur this weekend. And so we're watching that cluster of thunderstorms in South Florida. They already have gale warnings up, small craft advisories up. The main impact they will see is just increased rip current risk. And they do actually, because they've been kind of slammed with that rainfall, that I wish we could get some of, they also are under flash flood warning in the Miami area. So what will happen is, regardless of if this develops, though we're expecting it to, it'll move off to the north and off to the east, away from the U.S., and the Panhandle, again, does not see any impact from this. But what we're watching for is, what does the structure look like? The ingredients are there, but I want to break down the difference between extratropical versus subtropical and what we mean when we just say tropical. So basically, when we talked about our next significant rain chance is going to be with a cold front that comes through on Monday, potentially into Tuesday. So what that is, when you're looking on our surface analysis here, up in the St. Louis area, Oklahoma City, you're seeing a low pressure system, cold front coming off of it, stationary front off into the north. These west to east coast systems, the systems that bring us our daily weather, those are just your classic extratropical systems. Now, when we're talking about subtropical versus tropical systems, we're talking about location, but we're also talking about the actual structure of what we're identifying and what we're interested in. So obviously, tropical storms, they develop in the tropics, areas close to the equator. Subtropical systems can originate in the subtropics, or they can originate in the tropics, but it's less about their origin and more about what they are actually made up of. So extratropical systems, cold core, those are from 2 contrasting air masses. So we know in the Gulf of Mexico is typically warm, moist air, and then obviously for areas like North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, cold air. So polar air meets warm, moist air, and they battle it out. It's clashing, different densities, different air masses. Because of that, that's why, especially in springtime, we see severe weather season, because those systems can churn nasty weathers that spawns off tornadoes and severe thunderstorms, hail, etc. So That's extratropical. Subtropical is when it's a mix. It's not fully tropical, but it doesn't have any fronts. It doesn't have a warm front. It doesn't have a cold front. It's boundaryless, and it could have a cold core, or it could be transitioning into a warm core. Now let's talk about tropical, because what we're watching for this weekend is either or, subtropical or tropical storm. And either way it gets named. The National Hurricane Center started naming subtropical storms back in 2002. So it gets a name, and we consider it to be knocked off our list, and we move on to the next. But when you're talking about a tropical system, when you're talking about Hurricane Michael, you're talking about a well-organized, symmetrical system that has a fully warm core. It's by no means subtropical anymore, and the reason it's important is subtropical systems can turn tropical and then can turn into a hurricane, but a purely tropical system from the start, we talk about those waves we get off of Africa that really travel off to the west, and they have time to evolve and really organize. Those are going to have a better chance of evolving into a hurricane. Now, subtropical storms can, but what you'll notice about what we're watching this weekend is that low that you're seeing that comes up off into the north and east. It's going to encounter ingredients that are no longer favorable for it to intensify, and so if it does, we're anticipating for it to get named. We're anticipating for that storm to develop, subtropical or tropical or not, but we are not concerned in the Panhandle, and honestly most of the U.S. will not see impacts from this system. Along the east coastline, they could see some swelling, some rip currents, but this is just going to be a short-lived system, if that. I do want to touch base on just ingredients, a refresher of what ingredients we need for tropical development, because we are a couple weeks away and we could be knocking off that first name of the 2020 Atlantic list this weekend. All right, so of course, warm sea surface temperatures. We all know if you've lived in a tropical area, if you've lived in the Sunshine State, you know that we don't see hurricane season pick up until June, and you really don't see the peak until September, when we fully get those ocean Gulf waters back up and we get those temperatures back up. You really want those water temperatures to be at least 79, 80 degrees Fahrenheit for really to support tropical development. Weak vertical wind shear. Now, you would want to see wind shear if you're talking about severe weather. That's what we're watching for, because high wind shear in a severe weather threat, that's not hurricane season, things like tornadoes, that's going to help the rotation. That's going to help a tornado form and touch down. So that's not something that helps hurricanes. Hurricanes need to build. And so you want weak vertical, well, you don't want it, but a hurricane wants weak vertical wind shear. Strong upper level winds will tear a system apart that's trying to form out in the tropics or the subtropics. Low level disturbance to start off with, that's what we're monitoring in South Florida. Those areas, clusters of thunderstorm activity and just that disturbance to start. And instability and moisture, that's just with any basic thunderstorm as well. You need instability so that those air parcels can continue to rise, and moisture is fuel, but not just any moisture, of course, humid environments, but also warm seas. That's key. And then Coriolis force, objects in the northern hemisphere get deflected toward the right. That's what gives hurricanes kind of that look. And if there's not really intense Coriolis force right at the equator, so hurricanes cannot form right at the equator. That's why they have to form a little bit either above or below it. And if you were watching the morning show, you know that we were talking about typhoon and hurricane and cyclone, how it all means the same thing. They're just called different things based on where they form. And yesterday, the Philippines saw their first storm of their season. Typhoon targeted their area yesterday afternoon in their local time. So Coriolis, that's also something you need enough Coriolis for so that the air can actually start wrapping around the low pressure system. So all of this to say, we're not going to see any impacts from what is likely going to be subtropical or tropical storm Arthur. And I want to show you one last thing on analysis. I wanted to show you those sea surface temperatures and why, as that system progresses off to the north and the east, it not only can encounter stronger upper level winds, which we just talked about could tear the system apart, it also is going to head toward cooler waters, and that's not going to help with the fuel it needs to continue to intensify here. And to give you an example, we talked about 79, 80 degrees. That's what you would need to start for basic ingredients for tropical development. Yes, we have that in the Gulf for multiple areas. Yes, our sea surface temperatures are above normal this year. That's why a lot of projections are leading to an above normal, a very active hurricane season for the Atlantic. But okay, so you have those thunderstorms that's disorganized that we're monitoring in areas like Nassau, Bahamas, south of southeast Florida. Those water temperatures are sitting at 81. And as we progress into where the path of what will likely become Arthur will be, water temperatures at 68, 72, 70 degrees off the coastline near the Virginia Beach area. Yeah, that system doesn't have what it needs to work with anymore. So that's what we're monitoring. And typically there's what's called a Bermuda high, and it's a high pressure system that tends to set up and sit in the western Atlantic. So as it does so, the reason so many of these systems turn, which is what we're seeing with, again, what is likely to become subtropical or tropical storm Arthur, is that these systems, I've heard it described before, and I really like this analogy. These systems are like a leaf going down a stream. It'll take the easiest path it possibly can. They want to intensify. They want to develop. And so that high pressure system sets up, and it kind of leads these systems up north and northeast. Sometimes that high is a little bit stronger and pushes down, and they're forced more directly toward the coastline, and that's when you would see a direct landfall. And I'm just talking mainly about the Atlantic and those systems that originate from the waves off of Africa. So that's just something that we watch too, of course, where its path actually is. But big takeaway, would love if we could get some rain. We really need it. But otherwise, I do want to just check questions. Donna saying, rain, please come to Liberty County. I know, man. A lot of people saying where they're watching from. All right. I'm gonna just see if there was any questions. I hope I answered everything. And I will say this, humidity is up today, so that's good news for wildfire outlook. Obviously, we want high humidity and low winds when we're talking about wildfire season. If we have another burn ban, well, we have county enforced burn bans, but if we have another fire weather warning or fire weather watch, please abide by those and don't burn anything. But we need some relief here pretty soon, whether that be in the form of rainfall or continually high humidity. And so we are monitoring that. And of course, we're monitoring the tropics as well. All right, I see a lot of people saying where they're watching from. Thanks for saying hi, but not seeing a lot of questions. So if I see any others, I will go back and I will answer them. But hopefully that was a little refresher of what we're looking for, what we're looking at. And I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Sunscreen is what I'm going to say about that. We're seeing the 90s every single day from today through the end of the weekend. For inland spots, and the coastline will hold rather seasonal in the mid 70s. Mostly sunny, mostly dry. All right, I will see you guys all on midday, and have a wonderful weekend.